What is mindfulness? Well, this is what allows us to become mentally strong. It's actually the main kind of mental muscle that we're training here. But the term mindfulness is often used in so many different ways and misunderstood in today's terms. At least it's come a long way from its original roots. So if we look at where did mindfulness come from, it's a Pali word sati, which comes from the Sanskrit word smriti, and this essentially meant memory. So what are we remembering with mindfulness? Well, actually it's kind of simple. We're just remembering to be aware. That's the simplest definition of mindfulness. To remember to be aware. Now, to be a little more technical, this term in psychology is used called meta-awareness, because we're not just being aware of anything, being aware of the video that you're watching right now. It's actually being aware of the mind, being kind of the witnessing perspective that can watch mental processes as they happen. And that's a skill that we train. There's a story that I'll quote from meditation teacher and psychotherapist Doug Kraft. He writes this in Meditator's Field Guide. Walking through Paris one day, P.D. Ouspensky vowed to be continuously aware. A few moments later, he saw his favorite tobacco shop and turned in. 3 days later, he remembered his vow to be aware. End quote. So, I hope maybe that sounds familiar to some people. I know in my own life I can relate to having long periods where awareness goes offline. And especially if you've been meditating for a while, you realize how frequent this is. Actually, there was a Harvard study that found that we spend 47% of the day lost in thoughts. But it found this number by polling people, by sending a little notification to them, asking if they were aware of what they were doing at random times throughout the day. And I think it vastly underestimated how often we're not aware, because ironically, we need this skill of meta-awareness to be aware that we're not aware. So I think it's probably double than that. If I had to guess, we spend over 90% of the day unaware of what's happening in our minds. And it's kind of a scary thought, actually, because we're operating on autopilot when we're not aware. So this is, again, a main muscle that we're building in meditation. And it's a network of the brain. It's been associated with the frontoparietal network. And this allows us to skillfully toggle between other brain networks, like the default mode network, which is active when you're mind wandering and thinking about the future and past. So not surprisingly, experienced meditators have less connections, less connectivity in this default mode network area. They spend less time lost in thoughts, it seems. And they've developed the muscle of this frontoparietal network. There's the Jesuit meditator and author Anthony de Mello, who puts it a little more harshly. He said, "The unaware life is a mechanical life. It's not human. It's programmed, conditioned." And in a sense, we are kind of like animals, or just purely acting out of instinct when we don't have this other layer of awareness of how the mind's working that allows us to choose consciously to respond instead of reacting kind of mindlessly to different situations. So mindfulness is what you're training, the remembering to have meta-awareness. This is actually the first of the 4 R's that we've been working with. So again, recognize, release, relish, and remain. The recognize step is when you recognize there's a distraction, that meta-awareness has gone offline. What takes it offline is this kind of tension, this craving in the mind when it contracts down and starts searching for things or thinking about things. So that's what we release. And then that allows the mindfulness to come back. The meta-awareness is actually there as soon as we release the tension and craving, as soon as we release the distraction, we're aware again. And that's a wonderful thing because now we can choose, we can see what's in our mind, we can choose what kind of thoughts we would like, or at least direct away and no longer feed negative emotions that might be present. And this is the self directed neuroplasticity that we're doing, the kind of mental bicep curls that are changing the brain and changing our lives. There's a psychologist named Dr. Matt Rosano who thinks that meditation might have evolved 200 to 150,000 years ago. We were sitting in tribes, imagine around the fire and kind of gazing into it. And he thinks it's when this skill of meta awareness evolved that we might have started to train the mind, focusing it on purpose, or, there's many ways to meditate, over 300 different techniques. But what almost all of those techniques have in common is this meta awareness. So it's the very crux of meditation, because without this awareness, well, we don't have any chance to train the mind. And it's not just in the Buddhist tradition that they have this emphasis on meta awareness. In Taoism, this is probably what they call inner observation. In Advaita, they emphasize being aware of awareness. In Kabbalah, which is kind of the hidden teachings of Judaism, this is like the meditation tradition. They talk about the witness, or Tiferet. And in the Sufi tradition, there's this emphasis on objective consciousness. So there's many traditions that have something similar to mindfulness, this idea of being aware and using that to train and kind of reprogram the mind. There's actually a second definition to mindfulness that's given in the traditional meditation text, and that is to remember to apply the teachings. And this is one of the hardest things. We might even remember to be aware, but then what are we doing once we're aware? Well, hopefully we're actually applying the technique. In this case, let's say you recognized, but then applying the teaching is also to release the distraction, to relish, and to remain with the object of meditation. Then you've fulfilled both definitions of mindfulness, and you're making your mind in this way more powerful, because you're not just aware, but you're aware with wisdom. You're aware in a way that's retraining the mind. Now, lastly, I'd like to give a few tips that might help you become more mindful during the day. Now, this isn't something we can really force, but we can make it a fun game. So smiling will help you be mindful. You can check in before new activities, like every time before you sit down to drink a cup of tea, you just remind yourself, okay, I'd like to drink this tea with full awareness. You can hang around mindful people, so it does help to be around those who are kind of cultivating their minds. And you can kind of notice when someone's acting without any awareness, sometimes their limbs are just going wherever, but then you can kind of tell when someone's aware when they're moving, or even when they're speaking. There's some level of like self-control, even though it can still be very natural. It also helps to get curious about what's in your mind. Like, hey, what's going on in there? What kind of thoughts am I having today? What's the mind up to? There's also this phrase, what gets measured gets managed. So you could actually measure your mindfulness, giving yourself a little percentage score at the end of the day. Oh, how often was I mindful today? And in the FitMind app, this is one of the things you're logging in your daily mental fitness, is the ability to have continuous meta-awareness, which becomes samadhi. And that's a topic we'll talk about further in the course. I just remembered another one. There was a teacher, I think his name is Yoga Rahula, who would talk about mindful minutes. So just having one mindful minute at different points throughout the day. And according to my friend, he would say, like, all right, let's have some M&Ms, just popping an M&M. You, whenever you remember, take a minute, and just 1 minute to be sitting there with your breath or with metta, awareness of your body, whatever your object of meditation is, and you just stay present for 1 minute. And slowly over time, this will build the muscle of meta awareness. All right, so your daily challenge is to take one activity, a routine activity like brushing your teeth or showering, and try to be aware throughout the entire activity, maintaining the meta awareness. And wonderful. Thanks for taking the time to train your mind. I'll see you tomorrow for day 6, where we'll take the meta technique to the next level.